He used to call me worthless. Mocked my dreams throughout my entire childhood. 10 years later I came back. And bought the very house he was about to be evicted from. Life has a way of paying things back, in the sweetest way. This is my story. I was 9 when my mother remarried. Frank came into our lives with a stiff smile and a voice that never rose above a low, grumbling tone. He wasn't cruel in the way people picture cruelty. He didn't yell or throw things. No, Frank's kind of cruelty was colder than that. It was quiet, subtle. It came in the form of glances that said, "Why are you even here?" Or in the silence that followed when I asked him something simple, like if he liked the dinner I made in home EC class. He never answered. Just looked at me like I was wasting his time. And for a long time I believed I was. My mom tried. God, she tried. She loved him, or maybe she loved the idea of someone strong, stable, older. Someone who could give her the life she thought she'd lost when my dad left. I never blamed her. I still don't. She worked 2 jobs and fell asleep on the couch most nights still in her work clothes. She wanted help, and Frank seemed like help at the time. But he never wanted a daughter. Especially not one who dreamed too much. I was always the one with her head in the clouds, scribbling in notebooks, reading books at the dinner table, talking about college like it was a promise. Frank would scoff. He had this dry, humorless laugh that made me feel small. "College," he'd say, like the word itself offended him. "You think the world gives a damn about your poems and grades. You'll end up just like your mother, broke and desperate." That hurt more than I admitted, even to myself. It wasn't just an insult to me. It was a slap to my mom, who sat quietly during those dinners, eyes focused on her plate like if she didn't look up, the words wouldn't land. But they always did. They landed hard. I learned early not to expect anything from him. Not approval, not support, not even kindness. He treated me like a burden, a mouth to feed, a mistake he never signed up for. He never hit me, never cursed at me, never raised his voice. But sometimes I wished he had. Because at least then there'd be something visible. Something real. Instead, I lived in a house where I was invisible unless I did something he disapproved of. Still, I pushed forward. I joined the library club, the yearbook team, anything that kept me out of the house. I dreamed in silence and wrote essays in the dark, hoping that if I worked hard enough, maybe I could become someone he couldn't ignore. Maybe I could earn his respect. I didn't realize until much later that people like Frank don't give respect. They only take it from others. I turned 16, then 17. He started calling me Dreamer Girl, like it was some kind of joke. Once, I overheard him tell his friend that I'd probably get pregnant by graduation. That I'd never make it out of this town. That I'd end up in a trailer with some loser just like my mother did. He said it with a chuckle, like my whole future was some sitcom punchline. And my mother, she just stood there. I don't think she agreed with him, but she didn't defend me either. Maybe she was tired. Maybe she was scared. Or maybe she thought deep down that he might be right. I left home on my 18th birthday. No dramatic fight, no screaming, no tears. Just a quiet drive out of the driveway before the sun came up. I left a note on the kitchen table that said, "Thank you for raising me. I'll figure it out from here." That was the last time I saw either of them for a long time. Life wasn't easy after that. I slept on friends' couches, waited tables, cleaned motel rooms, anything to stay afloat. I got into community college with a partial scholarship and took night classes while working double shifts. There were days I wanted to give up, when my hands were raw and my body ached and the voice in my head still sounded a lot like Frank's. But I didn't quit. Couldn't. Because every time I thought of his smirk, his words, that dry laugh, I felt something burn inside me. Not hate. Not really. Just determination. A need to prove that I was never what he said I was. Took years. Years of sacrifice, of loneliness, of building brick by brick. But eventually I graduated. I got a job in finance. Then I got promoted. Then I started investing slowly, smartly in small properties. I didn't tell anyone. I didn't announce anything on Facebook. I just kept building. Quietly. On my own terms. I was 29 when the call came. Foreclosure file. Routine. But the name on the documents made me freeze. Frank's name. His signature. The address was my old house. My childhood. My prison. And now my opportunity. I didn't feel joy at first. Just stillness. Like the universe had turned a full circle and placed a decision right in my lap. I didn't need to take it. I could have walked away. But something deeper than revenge whispered, go. Own it. Not for him. For you. And so I did. I didn't tell him I was the buyer until the day of the final walkthrough. I could have sent a lawyer, handled everything through agents, let the sale go through without ever showing my face. But that would have been too easy. Too clean. This story, my story, deserved a moment. Reckoning. So I showed up at the house I hadn't stepped foot in for over a decade, wearing a navy blazer, low heels, and a calm smile I had spent years learning how to wear. He didn't recognize me at first. His hair was thinner, grayer. His shoulders had collapsed inward with time and defeat. He opened the door with that same annoyed frown I remembered from childhood, expecting another stranger here to poke around and pick at the pieces of his life. And then he froze. "Emma," he said. His voice cracked. "Is that?" "Yes," I said. "It's me." He blinked. What are you doing here?" I stepped over the threshold, past the door he never used to hold open for me. "I bought the house." For a full 5 seconds there was no sound. Just the creak of the floor under my heel and the slow spin of the ceiling fan above us. Then his mouth twisted into something between a laugh and a grunt. "Very funny. I'm not joking, Frank. Check the documents. My company handled the transaction. I signed the purchase agreement myself." He didn't move. Just stared at me like the room had turned upside down. His hands trembled slightly, and for the first time in my life I saw it, uncertainty in his eyes. "You," he said quietly. "How could you even afford this?" It wasn't just a question. It was a challenge. A wound. An echo of every time he'd told me I wouldn't amount to anything. I looked him in the eyes. "Hard work. Discipline. The same things you said I didn't have." He scoffed. "You don't know what this house has been through. You don't know what I've been through." "No," I said, "I don't. Because you never let me in. Not when I was a child and not now. You looked down on me, Frank. You made me feel small in every room I walked into. But I made it anyway. I built a life despite you. And now I'm standing in the house you're losing, because I earned what you never thought I could." He walked past me, his breathing suddenly heavier. "You think this makes you better than me?" "No," I said softly. "I think this makes me free." He slammed his fist against the wall, right next to the dent he'd made years ago that no one ever talked about. The wall didn't move. Neither did I. But he did. His face flushed red. His voice rising for the first time I could remember. "I gave your mother everything," he barked. "I put food on this table. Paid the bills. I did my part. And you made us pay in silence," I said, my voice steady. "You made love feel like a debt we could never repay." He pointed a trembling finger at me. "You ungrateful little." "Don't," I said, raising my hand. "Don't finish that sentence. I'm not a little girl anymore. And you don't get to call me names in a house that no longer belongs to you." He looked at me like he wanted to shout something to tear me down one last time. But whatever power he once held over me had crumbled. I wasn't afraid of him. Not anymore. I was the woman holding the keys now. "You have 30 days, I said. "I'll be fair. I'll give you time. But when that time is up, I expect the place empty." He didn't respond. He just sat down heavily in the worn armchair by the window, the same one he used to sit in while watching me clean dishes in silence. Now he looked small. And I felt tall for the first time in my life. As I turned to leave, he said something so quiet I almost missed it. "Why?" Paused. Then turned halfway toward him. "Because I needed to see it. I needed to stand in front of you. Not as your stepdaughter, not as a mistake you tolerated, but as a woman who survived you." And with that I walked out of the house. Not with triumph. Not with revenge. But with peace. He didn't move for a long time after I left. I saw him through the window, still slouched in that chair like the past had finally caught up with him. But I didn't come to gloat. I didn't come to see him beg or break. I came to finish something. Something that had started years ago when I was just a scared little girl trying to make herself small enough to avoid his sighs of disappointment. His words that always felt like warnings. His presence that filled the house like a pressure you couldn't name. 30 days. That's what I gave him. But on day 17 he called. I almost didn't pick up. His name flashing on my phone made my stomach tighten the same way it used to when I heard his car pull into the driveway. But something told me to answer. Emma, he said. We need to talk. His voice was rough, tired, and unfamiliar. I agreed to meet him. Not at the house, but at a coffee shop near the courthouse, neutral ground where memories couldn't crawl out of the wallpaper. He was already there when I arrived, sitting at a corner table, nursing a black coffee that had long since gone cold. I sat across from him and waited. He didn't speak right away. Finally he said, I was wrong about you. And blinked. I hadn't come expecting an apology. In fact, I hadn't thought he was capable of one. You were cruel, I said. Not just wrong. He looked down at his cup like it could hide him. I didn't know how to raise a girl. Especially not one that wasn't mine. You didn't have to raise me like your enemy, I replied. His eyes met mine. You reminded me too much of your mother. The strength, the defiance. I didn't know what to do with that. She loved you, I said flatly. I know, he whispered. And I didn't deserve it. There was a long silence between us, filled with all the words we'd never said. And then, like a match struck too close to dry wood, he lit up. But you didn't have to humiliate me, he snapped. You could have let me sell the house to someone else. You didn't have to be the one holding the deed. There it was. The real reason he called. The wound he couldn't hide. I didn't do this to humiliate you, Frank, I said, voice tight but calm. I did it to reclaim something. That house wasn't just wood and drywall. It was the place where I learned how to endure, how to survive you. And now it's mine. Not because I needed revenge, but because I needed closure. You bought it to remind me that I lost, he growled. To make sure I knew you won. No, I said firmly. I bought it to remind myself that I got out. That your voice doesn't live in my head anymore. That I don't need your approval or your permission to exist. His fists clenched on the table. People were starting to look, sensing the tension. He leaned in, voice low but angry. You think you're better than me now. I think I'm healed, I said. And maybe that looks like arrogance to someone who never did the work. That hit him. His eyes blinked fast, like he was trying to swallow tears but didn't know how. He stood up abruptly, the chair scraping loud against the tile. I'll be out in 10 days, he muttered. Don't worry. I watched him walk out of that cafe, a man too proud to be helped and too broken to change. And something inside me cracked, but it wasn't pain. It was release. 10 days later, I returned to the house. The front door was ajar. The living room was empty except for a stack of letters on the fireplace mantel and a ring of keys beside them. The walls looked taller, brighter, like they could finally breathe. Picked up the letters. They weren't for me. They were for my mother. Old ones, yellowed, addressed in his handwriting. In one he wrote, I never knew how to love her the way she needed. Maybe she got that from you. And suddenly I didn't know how to feel. That night I walked through every room. My old bedroom, still haunted by quiet tears under blankets. The kitchen where I used to flinch at every sound. The hallway where his shadow used to stretch long and dark. I touched the walls. I touched the silence. And I realized, I wasn't angry anymore. Not because he'd apologized. Not because he changed. But because I did. I was no longer that little girl afraid of disappointing him. I was no longer the woman chasing his validation. I was a homeowner. A daughter who'd chosen peace over bitterness. And so, I stood in the middle of the living room and said it out loud just once. You don't control me anymore. The words didn't echo. They landed soft and final, like a door closing gently behind me. And that night, I slept in the master bedroom with the windows wide open, breathing air that finally belonged to me. The first morning I woke up in that house, it felt almost unreal. The light came through the same old windows, filtered by the same lace curtains my mother had once hung. But something was different. The silence wasn't heavy anymore. It wasn't waiting to break under someone's temper or judgment. It was peaceful. It was mine. I made coffee in the kitchen where I used to sneak cookies as a child, afraid of the sound my feet made on the linoleum floor. Now I walked barefoot with no fear, humming to myself as the kettle whistled. That house, once a prison of rules and low expectations, was now a canvas I could finally paint my own colors on. Over the next few weeks I started slowly. I didn't tear everything down right away. I kept some of my mother's touches, the floral tiles in the bathroom, her handwriting in the pantry where she used to label the jars of sugar and rice. But I changed the parts that carried his weight. I ripped out the stiff leather recliner where he used to sit, silent and judgmental. I painted over the dark wood panels in the dining room, brightening the space with soft creams and sage green. It wasn't just redecorating. It was reclaiming. My therapist once told me healing isn't always loud. Sometimes it's soft and deliberate. Sometimes it's planting new roots where something painful once stood. And that's what I did. I filled the space with softness, with warmth, with friends who'd never been allowed inside when I was a teenager, with music that would have once been called noise, with laughter that echoed down hallways that used to swallow sound. And eventually, I let my stepfather's presence fade. Not erased but not empowered either. One afternoon, as I was reorganizing the storage closet, I found a box I hadn't seen before. Tucked in the corner under a faded blanket was a set of old home videos. My heart stopped. Part of me didn't want to watch. Part of me feared what memories those tapes would unearth. But I did. I played them alone, curled up on the living room couch with a blanket around my legs and a glass of wine on the coffee table. Most of the footage was grainy, shaky. Family gatherings, birthdays, summers in the backyard. And there, among the clutter of voices and laughter, was him. My stepfather. Younger. Smiling. Holding a camera. Teasing my mom. Clapping for me when I took my first dive into the pool. He wasn't always cruel. There had been moments, small ones flickering like candles that I had forgotten. Or buried. Or never understood until now. And I cried. Not for him. But for the complexity of it all. For the way people aren't always just villains or heroes. For the ache of a childhood that didn't feel safe. And the glimpses of what could have been if he'd just known how to love without condition. After that, I decided not to throw the tapes away. I kept them in a drawer. Not to dwell, but to remember that even pain has layers. That closure doesn't require erasing the past, only understanding it. A few months later I got a letter in the mail. It was from Frank. Just a single page. He wrote, "I've left town. I won't be back. I know you don't need anything from me, but I wanted to say thank you. For buying the house. For taking care of it. For being stronger than I ever was." I sat with that letter for a long time. It wasn't redemption. It wasn't enough to make up for the years he made me feel small. But it was something. And I took it. Not because I needed his permission. But because I had already moved on. Today the house is full of life. I host Sunday brunches. My niece sleeps over in the bedroom that used to be mine. And I tuck her in without fear that anyone will raise their voice through the walls. There's a vegetable garden out back where the old shed used to stand. And every spring the daffodils bloom right by the mailbox. Just like my mom used to plant them. People ask me sometimes why I kept the house. Why I didn't just walk away and start fresh somewhere else. And the answer is simple. Because healing isn't always running. Sometimes it's staying. Standing. Choosing to rewrite the story in the same place it was written. I didn't keep the house because it was perfect. Kept it because I finally am. If this story resonated with you, If you've ever been underestimated, silenced, or made to feel small, I just want you to know, you're not alone. We carry so much more strength than the world ever gives us credit for. And sometimes the best revenge is becoming everything they said you couldn't be. If you made it this far, thank you for listening. Truly. Sharing this story wasn't easy, but I hope it gave you something, whether it's hope, healing, or just the comfort of being understood. Don't forget to like this video if it touched you in any way, and hit that subscribe button for more real-life stories told from the heart. I post every week, and I'd love to have you here with me, growing, healing, and rising above together. And hey, leave me a comment. Tell me your story. I read every single one. Until next time, take care of yourself. You deserve peace. You deserve joy. You deserve to own your story.